So many of you had said that when the reprint of the Messenger was released, that the values for the original print of the Messenger would drop. And you can officially give yourself a pat on the back if you were one of the many that had that prediction. Because as it stands today, the value of a special edition, not even just a standard edition, because the standard edition first print messenger physical copy, those were going for around 200, and then the limited edition or like the special edition versions were going for around 300. Well, today the special edition versions of the messenger, the first print, are now going for roughly around 135 bucks. So that is around a 55% drop from the height of what this game was going for. This was definitely a more valuable Switch game that has now dropped in value. And I think that it's a good thing. I think it's actually a really good thing for a couple of reasons. One, this version does come with all the DLC, which this physical version does not. Um, and here you can easily walk into most game stores and pick this up for, I think, around 30 bucks. So that's the other good thing. If you are a collector and you are big on like first print games, you like having the first print of something, then now this has become a lot more accessible to you, right? $135 is a lot more easy to swallow than $300 for a first print Nintendo Switch game. But what are the long-term implications of things like this, especially considering the fact that now we have the Switch 2 on the horizon and Switch 2 games are going to be coming out? Now, I've often seen where when it comes to like the NES, and I'm referencing the NES because we're now, what, 40 odd years away from the heyday of the NES. And you have certain NES games that came in either a 3-screw physical release or a 5-screw physical release. And we've seen where I think it's the either the 3-screw or the 5-screw. I can't remember which one it is, but one of those two usually carries a much higher value for collectors of the NES. I think you see it with games like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. There's either a 5-screw version, I think, that's more valuable than the 3-screw, or one of the two. And I think you've also seen it with certain Zelda games. You've seen it with the original Mega Man game. There's a number of games that have that. I even think Section Z is in that same category of, is it a 3-screw or is it a 5-screw? And I think for collectors of the NES, this matters, right? If you're someone who knows the history of the NES, you study the video game library of the NES, and you know about these different releases, then that's where that stuff comes into play. And I think that's where the very specific collectors that are collecting in that specific niche, I think that's where they see value in the difference between like a 3-screw and a 5-screw. And we're still very much connected to the original Switch. We're not that far away from it yet to where I think people are dissecting the different releases, whether it's first print, second print, third print, or things like that. And I think that, for collectors of the Switch, those who like to collect certain games, I think maybe in a distant future, having a first print game versus like a reprint or a re-release, I think that's when that's going to come into play with certain collectors. Now, from a gameplay perspective, obviously you want the re-release, you want the reprint, because the reprint has more game for you to play. There's more features, it has all the DLC. You don't have to worry about anything like that. But what Nintendo has shown us, at least for the next 10 to 15 years, we should still have access to the servers that would allow someone who has a standard edition to get all of the updates without necessarily having to buy the reprinted version. What happens when Nintendo completely moves on from all things Switch 1 and Switch 2? What happens when they completely do a redesign and create a brand new system that doesn't use any of the, carts that were made for the Switch or the Switch 2? What will happen then? We don't know. But what we do know is that for the immediate future, when it comes to collectors that are collecting for the Switch, and there are a lot of people collecting for the Switch these days, this has had a major impact on the value of the Messenger. And again, I think it's a good thing for any and everyone wanting to start collecting for the Switch. I think if you've never had any of these games, this is a great time and a great opportunity for you to get in on this. Um, Strike while the iron's hot. The only other thing that I'll say in reference to this is that I have been looking at obviously the changes in video game pricing, and what I've noticed is that there's a little bit of a disparity between like modern games and retro games, where I'm seeing certain retro games drop in price that were once really expensive, and these are games that haven't had any type of re-release. I don't even think there's any type of like digital download for them. The only other way that you can play these games is via emulation. And one game that comes to my mind is GigaWing 2. Now, GigaWing 2 is a very rare shoot 'em up on the Dreamcast. It's a very rare shoot 'em up. It's not one that you see that often, or at all, really. And it's one of those games where I don't know if I've ever seen any type of re-release for GigaWing. I can't say that I've ever seen any type of re-release for it. And there was a point where GigaWing was like a $400 to a $450 game. Well, GigaWing 2 is actually dropped down into like the somewhere in the 270s to like 300s, losing at least 30% of its value from what we saw in the highs. And there really hasn't been any type of re-release of GigaWing. There's no, at least not to my knowledge. If you guys know of another place that you can play GigaWing outside of emulation of the Dreamcast, let me know in the comments down below. But I'm seeing a fluctuation in a game like GigaWing for a system that, like, there's no modernization of the Dreamcast really. Yes, certain games have been brought to other platforms, but a large part of the Dreamcast library is still locked to the Dreamcast. So it's very interesting to see how prices shift, and there's no real reason that tells you why GigaWing went down in price. Now, on the flip side of that, you have a game like Last Resort, which I had in a recent video. And Last Resort is a game that I picked up for around 600 bucks, maybe 2 years ago. And I've seen it kind of fluctuate in the mid 600s, low 700s, but I'm seeing listings for Last Resort go for $1,100, $1,200. And there's no real reason. I don't really understand why a game like Last Resort would have gone up in value, especially considering that there are multiple ways to play Last Resort, not only emulation, but I'm pretty sure you can download it onto the Switch. On top of that, it's also included as one of the games in the Neo Geo mini console. So there's multiple ways to play Last Resort, yet the original physical copy is continuing to go up in price and is now over $1,000 for the game. So it's really difficult to really know the rhyme or reason why some games go up in price, why some games go down in price. And it's just another reason why you shouldn't invest in video games or look at video games as any type of investment, because there's really no rhyme or reason why certain games drop in value or gain in value. There are obviously other cases where we understand why a certain game goes up in value, and usually it's because of hype produced by social media, or there's some sort of scarcity, or some, what e-store is closing down and you'll no longer be able to download it, which makes all the physical copies that much more valuable. There's like a handful of reasons why we can see why a game would go up in value, but when there's really been no change in the availability of a game and it just suddenly drops or raises in value, those things feel pretty random and it's really hard to tell. So that's why at the end of the day, it's always best to just buy the games that you like, collect the games that you'll want to play, and then you'll never really have to worry about, the value of a game. But I thought that this was really interesting. I figured this would be something that I revisit with the channel, because now the Messenger has been out for quite some time now, and we've been able to kind of look back and see the impact it's had on the first print, and a lot of you were right. So let me know what you think about this down in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video. I may do some live streaming this evening. I've been trying to beat Axlay on the Super Nintendo. I haven't beaten it yet, but maybe we'll get lucky tonight and I might be able to beat it. So I may be back later on this evening with a live for Axlay, but until then, I will catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.